Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Actors Room. I am Amy Swartz, Preservation and Programs Director at Historic St. John Church, and I am so pleased to be interviewing Ken Moretti today. Hi, Ken. How are you?
Hello. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Welcome. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm excited to see you and miss seeing everybody on the cast, so it's great to be able to connect this way. Thanks for being with me.
Me too.
I'm going to start with your history with Historic St. John's Church and the Second Virginia Convention. Tell me how long you've been in the show.
You know, I look back and interestingly enough, it's all of a sudden 10 years.
Okay.
It's gone by very quickly.
Wow. And how did you first get involved?
I moved here to Richmond 25 years ago, and I've been an actor now since I was a kid. Not full-time until the last 15 years, let's say. And one of the things that I wanted to try to keep doing was stage productions, because I had done a lot of theater in New York. And I auditioned for a production at the Belmont Company, the Belmont Theater Company in Richmond, that was being directed by a fellow named Jerry Natari. And it was Arsenic and Old Lace. And not only was Jerry the director, but Woody Harrelson was also in the show.
Okay.
So I met those two chaps, and at some point in time, we converted to a conversation about St. John's Church and the Patrick Henry reenactments, which the two of them were in. So it took a few years to catch up to that conversation, but around 2010, Jerry had come to see a production that I was in, a stage production that I was in, and he asked me later if I was interested in auditioning, because at that point auditions had come up. So I felt like maybe I should give this a try. I was a history major in college, and I always had an affinity for the historical. And one thing led to another, and he introduced me to Kevin Grants, and Kevin auditioned me and said I could use you.
Well, that's great. Okay, wonderful. I loved hearing those connections and those familiar names and places. And tell me, where in New York City?
New York City and Westchester County, which is the county just north of New York City, New York, New Jersey, tri-state area. I did most of my acting. Okay.
All right. And what roles do you currently play in the Second Virginia Convention?
I'm one of those, well, I guess you would call me a swing actor, because Charles has been able to cast me as Thomas Nelson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Jefferson, Richard Henry Lee. So I do a plethora of roles. Some on the nay side, some on the I side.
Right. And do you have a favorite?
I like Richard Henry Lee close to the favorite, because he sets the stage for the entire fiery conversation. He's, I guess you would call him, today's term, he'd be a left-wing Democrat wanting to burn down the building and get started and not stand for any stuff that the Kings was throwing at us.
Right.
Would not stand for. So I kind of liked his portrayal.
Okay. And are there any memorable shows that pop out? Any things that happened that were funny or meaningful to you over the years?
I've thought of a few. I enjoyed the public show where the governor was in attendance. Governor Northam came to see a production, and I happened to be in the show, and I happened to be in the Richard Henry Lee pew, and he was right up front with us. So that was interesting. That made the audience a little bit more entertaining for me.
Okay.
I also remember the production we did at the Richmond jail. I thought that was pretty memorable as well, since we were out of the church, but in the jail, performing our show as if we were in the church.
Right.
Sitting amongst the attendees who were the resident in jail. So that was, and they were on it. they had prepared. They had a history lesson. They knew what was coming, and they
Right.
were all over the production. So they were
Yeah, that was fun. I was able to attend that one as well.
quite a different
And
audience.
speaking of that, how do you, we don't do a lot of shows offsite, although we would love to do that in the future. And certainly this time right now that we're experiencing is making everyone think about how to,
Mhm.
reach out to our audiences. How could you compare being in the church versus when you were offsite at that show? Did you have a different feel, or you all work together so well as a cast, the camaraderie's there and you bounce off each other, but I'm just curious if it felt a lot different to you being offsite away from the church.
It feels a little different because we're not in a familiar environment prior to the production, and we're not in a familiar environment during the production. But we all know the job we have to do, and we tend to compartmentalize. As actors, we compartmentalize it in that regardless of where we are, you still have to do the same work.
Right.
So we bring our tools with us, and sometimes you move from house to house to do a job. You still have the same tools. You still have to
That's
perform
right.
the same work, and you have to isolate yourself, even though there might be a bank robber sitting next to me or a child from a Title I school. You still have to do the same work. The logistical part is more of a challenge because, for example, when we did the Richmond jail production, we had to get into cars in costume,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a clown car because 7
Right.
delegates pop out of this car in front of the jail. It's
Right.
if you step back and separate yourself, it's an interesting thing to think about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So can you think of any bloopers that may have happened that, either by you or by another cast member that stand out?
Well, early on when I first started and I didn't have a Ken Moretti costume, I would share pants, shirts, shoes,
Right.
vests, etc. And one pair of pants didn't act too well on me. They kept trying to get away from me. They didn't actually fall, but they came apart at the seam in an untimely fashion, and I really felt like I was in a bad place. But
Oh boy.
I recovered by holding my hands near my back pockets, and,
Right.
and fortunately, it was after most of my monologue and not during it.
Right.
But I was a little uncomfortable the rest of the time and couldn't wait to get out of the pew.
That is funny because I had another story just like that one from another cast member, which I guess when we're putting all these together online, everyone will get to see them. And what's really neat about that in general is just seeing the common thread that you all have spoken of throughout, no pun intended, I guess, with the costumes that you've spoken of
Right.
throughout the interviews.
Call them growing pains.
Right. You mentioned earlier students and doing shows for kids. Are they always bring sort of a special and different point of view sometimes, and definitely a different energy to the show. Do you have any memorable experiences for doing a show with students?
Well, it's amazing when you think about it, how vast the word gets out around about our productions. And as you know, we have schools from all different areas of the country come to see our production. And the ones that are from the West Coast are the most memorable because they have more of an amazed perspective about it. So having been a history major, there was a school from Washington State that came to a show once, and when we meet and greet after the show, a couple of the kids had this starry, wide-eyed look on them like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this actually happened like this, which is a typical response.
Right.
So I leaned over to one of the sponsors who was standing next to the student, and I said, see, kids, there was history before the gold rush.
Right.
And he turned to me and looked and went, dude. And it was
That
kind
is
of
funny.
it was a revelation. And the moderator looked at me and said, "Nice."
Ah, that's great.
Yeah,
Oh, that's funny.
yeah.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate your time.
This
And
is great.
as I've said at the beginning, we are looking forward to all being together again back at St. John's Church. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us, everyone, and tune in next
You're
time for
welcome.
another interview. Thank you, Ken.
Have a great day.
Bye. Take care.